Welcome to Gravity this season. Thanks for joining us. This month we'll be taking a look at skiing. We've broken it down into two series, kind of a bunny slope series and a black diamond series. So we'll kind of divide that up so there's some progression in the program. Skiing's a very seasonal sport, so there's some periodization built into the programs today. And just some facts on skiing. The United States Ski Association reports over 50 million lift tickets are sold per year. So you've got 50 million people going up and down the mountains every year. A lot of them on weekend vacations. Some of them are ski junkies, so we'll address that later. Now there's three different types of skiing. There's probably more than that. The three main types, you've got your alpine skiing, more your traditional stuff, going down the hill, carving back and forth. That's what most people are doing on their vacations. And then you've got your cross-country skiing. So back and forth, a lot of arm drivers in that sport. Both cross-country and alpine look very sagittal plane, but if you take a look at the dynamics of the biomechanics, you'll notice that there's a lot of transverse plane and frontal plane movement as well. And then there's telemark skiing. Telemark and cross-country, the big difference is that the heel comes up. With the alpine skiing or traditional skiing, you're gonna see that our foot is kind of locked into dorsiflexion. So that's a big switch for the rest of the body to adjust to. So a lot of with the alpine skiing, the big component of that is to be able to turn, stop, carve, and you've got this giant orthotic on your foot. So you've got these long skis, they're kind of concave, they're bent, they're curved, they're thin in the middle and thick out here, more like an hourglass. So when you lean one way, dig the edges into the skis, you get that turn effect. So you'll see a lot of frontal plane stability required, but still some sagittal plane. Everything's really about fluidity and efficiency. So again, they all appear sagittal plane, but we're going to go into frontal plane and transverse plane movements. So we've got a very seasonal sport. We've got things that we've got to consider, people that are coming off of desk jobs and going into a training program and then up to the pre-season ski program. So hopefully this will be some great ideas, and I know that there are experts out there in skiing that know a whole heck of a lot more than I do. These are just ideas, a thought process to get you thinking about how to put together semi-private or private training programs in order to capitalize on that market. It's coming up, the ski season's coming up shortly, so start now, get those programs out. Again, start with the bunny slopes. Next month or a couple months down the road, you'll see our Black Diamond series. So thanks for joining us, and we'll start now. Welcome to Gravity this season skiing. We're at the Black Diamond slopes, so we're way up top of the mountain. As you can see, our incline is a little bit higher, so we're progressively getting stronger. We're getting our client to get more of a functional approach to skiing. So they've gone through the readiness program. If you haven't already checked out the bunny slopes, make sure to go back and check that video. There's some real basic foundation stuff in there and a lot of great ideas for you to implement into your own ski readiness program. So again, this Black Diamond program, a little bit more of a functional approach. We're really getting into the nitty-gritty of the movements, and we're talking about alpine skiing. So rather than the cross country and the telemark skiing where the heel comes up, we're sticking with alpine, more recreational alpine, kind of the moms and the pops and the family vacations you're hoping to capitalize on. So again, a progressive functional approach. We're in that pre-season category. So we had training camp with bunny season. Now we're in the pre-season, about 3 or 4 weeks away from our trip. Again, skiing's a 3D sport. A lot of functional movement here, a lot of movement in the transverse plane, the sagittal plane, the frontal plane. We know all that. And it's a full body movement. So you've got the whole pell truncularis involved. And if you haven't heard of Gary Gray's pell truncularis, it's the pelvis, the trunk, the scapula, and the humerus. Everything kind of drives together in order to create all this wonderful top-down movement. So if we're digging our pole into the snow to turn around it or to help keep our balance, all those muscles, all those links are part of that chain, all the way down to the ankle really. So we could call it the tibiofemoral pell truncularis. Make up your own word. We also know that there's some bottom-up stuff. So the skis are hitting the snow. We've got a big orthotic on our foot. We've got chain reaction through the body that's coming up from the bottom. So we're going to stick with that strategy of a top-down and a bottom-up approach, three-dimensional, a lot of transverse plane stuff, and just really build on that readiness program. So our strategies are to increase the demand to more functional, progressive exercises and continue with the increased stability, because when we do things like we're going to add an AirX pad to an exercise or a stability disc, we're going to decrease the stability that's given for free, and which is going to increase the demand for stability when the body is attached to it. So decreased stability environment equals increased stiffness at the body. So we're gonna go with some high kneeling stuff. We're gonna do some plyometric work, and we're always gonna keep it three-dimensional. So we're gonna start off by assuming that we've gone through a dynamic warm-up. You saw that we had the cardio pull with thousands of variations. You can do that as well. Anything that just gets the body moved up or tweaked in 3 different planes and stimulated, all the proprioceptors, the muscles, and all that stuff you know about are all warmed up and ready to go. So Nicole's here again to help us out, and we're gonna start off with some plyometrics. So we're gonna go with 2 different variations of this exercise. I'm gonna curveball Nicole. She doesn't know what's coming really. She knows there's some prone work coming, but we're gonna go into a plyo sprint start is what this is called. So we're in a triped position, the elbows and the knee are all down, and what she's going to do is start to go into a little bit of a hopping motion where we get that stimulation all the way through the calf, tibialis posterior, gastroc, soleus, peroneus longus, quads, hips, trunk has to stabilize. A lot of bang for your buck here. The tweaks are, you can go into different variations of foot. So you can go frontal plane tweaks where she's going back and forth. You can't see it, but her foot's going a little bit closer to the camera and a little bit away from the camera. Back and forth in that frontal plane. And we can also tweak the transverse plane. So she might internally rotate when she lands and externally rotate. Try these at home, try these in your studio to feel the difference. You'll feel the quads turn on a little bit more. You'll feel the adductors turn on a little bit more with each of those little tweaks. Now that we've got her warmed up, we've got some external stuff that you can add, and these are just ideas that we come up with out on this sunny mountain here. But you've probably seen these stability discs. This is more of a transverse plane disc, and this is, you know, we've played around with it quite a bit, and we get to notice that this is a real increased challenge to our friends the quadriceps. So when you do that same movement, minus the plyometric, obviously this would fall down. We have instability in that transverse plane, so I can shift her heel around quite a bit just with a little bit of force. But you'll notice if you try something like this, if it's a Bosu ball or anything that sets you up where there's less stability, everything else upstairs has to compensate. So Nicole's going to say, hey, my quads are burning. That's because there's a different demand to the body. There's a lot of transverse plane, and you know those quads come down and wrap around the knees, and they don't just attach to the back of the tibia, they wrap around. You've got those nice attachments on the medial and lateral sides. How's that feeling?
Good.
All right, so I'm gonna take that, give her a little bit of a break. So you can do this with AirX pads as well. You can slap this on the squat stand and do the same thing. It's gonna be a tweak to the stability, so a little bit different approach. Next we're gonna stick with the lower body but move up the chain a little bit into what's called hip abduction. Now, most of you know, I'll come up and I'll just say it up front, this isn't my favorite exercise for a lot of things. However, for today, for the functional approach, we're gonna use hip abduction. And the reason is, if you can zoom out, if I'm standing in line at the lift and I was thinking to myself, how do I work in hip abduction? Because I know sometimes our hip abductors actually abduct the hip, but they actually extend the hip as well and do all kinds of fun things in transverse plane. But if I'm just pushing off on a flat ground and I'm just doing the old push-off ski back and forth, almost like, it looks more like ice skating, but you're just traversing on a flat terrain, sometimes even uphill, or you see those cross-country guys pushing off to the sides. They're getting into that glute medius. They're getting into all the abductors and all the external rotators to do that. So finally, here we have a nice exercise for hip abduction. We put the feet in between the cables, and she's gonna just press right out, back and forth. And the focus here is perhaps on driving the heel down a little bit so we get a little hip extension. That way it mimics a little bit more of the actual sport of just pushing off, and I'm not sure what the name of that actual skill is in skiing, but that's how I get around when we're trying to get to the shortest lift line. And you also focus on that transition from eccentric to concentric. So there's all kinds of variations here with regards to, well, I'm sorry, there's not. You can't do the static equilibrium. I always try to trick people in trying to do that. It's a tough one. So if you can try to push off one side, you can change the angle of the back a little bit, but that's a nice exercise that really transfers nicely into that flat surface skiing. Now, we're going to go into some high kneeling lateral work now. So we've got to get the equipment set up, get the pulleys up real high. And when we talk about high kneeling lateral, remember we wanted to do top-down strategies to get the trunk stable into the frontal plane. So now we started in the readiness program with some weights. Now we're going to ramp the intensity up with the cable, and she's going to go up overhead with this cable. And really what we're working on is lengthening the whole hip and the oblique in the frontal plane, excuse me. the transverse plane's in there, I guarantee, because you can't just laterally flex your trunk. And this is a tough exercise because look at the lever lengths. So I could have been a lot nicer and dropped the level down, so we won't do a whole lot of repetitions here. So high kneeling, lateral overhead reach, and then you can really just blend that right into some nice trunk rotations. And again, that's going to transfer to the sport because you're moving back and forth in the transverse plane too. You might use your arms to grab the pole, rotate the peltruncularis, which results in the pelvis shifting, which results in the femur moving, which results in the tibia moving, which results in hopefully us turning and carving down that mountain nicely. Lots of variations with inclines and declines here. Trunk rotation is a real functional exercise pretty much for any type of sport. Transverse plane rules. Huh? Okay, now we're going to go into back to the lower body. So we're going to get into some really tough lunges, and we know that we're just only weeks away from hitting the slopes, so we really got to capitalize on that basic program that we put together and now start to really get into the transformation zone of carving or skiing. And we know when we're beginner skiers, we're all timid and we're all out here and we're flexed and we're not efficient at all. You watch pros ski and they're just kind of relaxed, efficient, they can go up and down the mountain, but at first we're timid, we're a little bit shaky in all three planes, and we're going to be a little bit more flexed just because it's called guarding. We don't want to fall from here, but rather from here, just like babies when they first start walking, right? Is that a good analogy? No. Okay. All right, so we're going to start off with a lateral lunge. So Nicole's going to face me so you get a nice look at the posterior calf here of her left leg. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down into a lateral lunge, so her body weight comes down, and we're going to stay here. Not just stay here, but we're going to use the knee as a driver now. It's hard to see on the camera, so I'll try to explain what's happening. What we're going to do is drive the knee in the sagittal plane, so she's going to come right towards me. So literally it's just a little bit deeper of a lunge, back and forth, back and forth. This is really going to increase the challenge for the hip to be in that flexed position. The back's loaded, the quads are loaded, the calves are loaded, the hamstrings are helping facilitate that. She's feeling that one. Take a quick break, and then we're going to drive in different planes. If you look at skiing and you watch some of the, you don't have to be a magician to come up with programming. Just get on YouTube and watch sports, look at the movements, find the transformation zones of the activities, and you can mimic that on the GTS with your equipment, with whatever you want. So now we're going to do kind of what you're doing when you turn is you're going to lean your knees in. Obviously your weight shifts that way as well, but we're going to call that a transverse plane knee driver. So she's down here in this flexed position. We're loaded. It's an ED, flexed. It's not flexing. And we're internally and externally rotating. You feel that in different parts of the hips and the quads. And the nice thing about this is it also mimics that boot. That boot's got her locked in dorsiflexion, and everything upstairs has to compensate for it. So this is a tough movement. Doesn't look real tough, but when you try it, you'll see that there's a nice little demand there. Now, we'll give her another rest, and we're going to take that same exercise and add a top-down driver. So we're going to take a weight, and I'll give her a nice light weight to start off with. Although this weighs about 40 pounds, go ahead and take that. And we're going to do a lateral lunge, the same type of movement, but now we're going to kind of flush out the quads. So she's going to do that full movement and add a frontal plane tweak. So she's really going to reach out there. And if you look at skiing, you can see that when you turn, there's the dig in them with one leg and rotate, because if you really want to get picky, you could internally rotate this foot. You want to try that? Curveball for you. Not quite that much. That might hurt. If there's pain, you tweak it, right? So now she's internally rotator. Her body on her ski would literally be turning to the right, which means that her trunk would be flexing to the left or right. So we'll cover both bases. She can put it in the other hand, do the same thing, and just reach straight down towards that inside heel, back and forth. So little simple ways to add variations, to add intensity tweaks to the movement. Very functional for skiing and very stimulating for the lower extremities. We didn't mess with these, but we can. We got RX pads, you got stability discs, you got all kinds of things to tweak those different planes to increase the demand. Now we're going into reverse lunge. Reverse lunge is really going to rock that leg, so I'm trying to talk a little bit to give Nicole a nice rest period. And we're going to do what's called a unilateral reverse lunge with same side reach to ankle. Huh? Can we just come up with an acronym for that? So what that means is her left leg is lunging, and I'm just going to be mean because she's a gut check girl. Check out gutcheckfitness.com. Look out. As she comes down into that lunge, we're going to add that lateral or that frontal plane tweak. And again, what it's doing is getting the trunk to flex towards that leg. That's really going to get into adductors. It's really gonna get into the hamstrings. It's really gonna get into the trunk, the back, all the way up that whole peltruncularis. She might even reach out a little bit further. You see the difference there?
Oh, yeah.
Don't lie to me. There we go. So lots of tweaks. She can keep doing these when we're waiting here. But you can see we're really getting the legs conditioned for that whole, you know, maybe it's a 3-minute run, maybe it's a 5-minute run, maybe you're lucky enough to live in the Alps. And I got to give a shout out to our Netherlands distributor, who I know that you guys are taking a big ski trip soon, and I remember you inviting me on that. I want to know more about it. So that is our Black Diamond ski program. Again, these are just ideas to help facilitate a thought process of creating functional programming using the Gravity and the GTS in your facility.